Well, he's going to edit this later.
Welcome to the UDC, University of the District of Columbia School of Business and Public Administration lecture series on leadership. And with that, we have an honorable speaker, Dr. Mark Maccabee, who will be introduced by the Dean of the School, Dr. Mohammed Safari. Dr. Safari.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a great occasion, actually, and it is an honor for me to coming and making a brief introduction. Although he doesn't need any introduction of Dr. Maccoby. He's a great author and expert on leadership, and this is what actually we truly need in these days. What the leadership is about. One of the things I read more and more recently, I've been saying is that there are lots of reasons why organizations fail. It could be expertise or implementations or functional area, but the main really part is that when you look at it, is lack of leadership and lack of vision. That's what kills organizations. You can perform well your job, but if it's not going anywhere, it's a dead zone. In recent time, you have seen all the organizations. The most recent one was Sears that, fought for bankruptcy, everything else. Sears, you're too young to know, was the epitome of an organization. Everybody wanted to copy them. They were everywhere. They were such a powerful system, and all those things. At my time, that was it. But look what happened to them. If there is no vision and good leadership, that's what happens. And that's why it is so significant to have experts like Dr. Maccoby to be here and talking to you about this. It also, I want to make one other point, is that, of course, this is a university, classroom situation, and all those things. But learning is not about coming and teaching a textbook, going through the testing and all those things. Okay, that's part of it. That's a skills. But we would like our students to face and see and hear from people like Dr. Maccoby, that sharing that experience, sharing what the real world is about, is part of experiential learning that we emphasize here. A real world and real application of what you learn. It's not just a textbook thing. It's the real thing happening. We just had the election yesterday, and there are consequences. All that is part of your participation. And sometimes we don't have to like the outcomes, but still we have to live with it and see what we can do with it. So without further ado, I would like to give the gavel to Dr. Maccoby. And by the way, although we save it to the end of the part, but since I have to go to another meeting, we have a small token of appreciation for you, and I hope you will like it. So I'll leave it here actually for you, and
Let me ask you guys a few more words about Dr. Maccabee. And we've met about 10 years ago, but the reason that why we brought Dr. Maccabee on campus, he spent about 50 or so years working with organizations, with top managers, leaders worldwide. I don't know if you're aware, he has a worldwide reputation, and Dr. Maccabee only works with top elite world schools, such as Oxford, Harvard, and obviously UDC. And so we welcome, thank you for coming to our school. He travels worldwide. He's been knighted in the country of Sweden, was given an honorable title, and even today, right now he is about to travel to Honduras to conduct leadership seminars and organizational consulting, and he also works right now with American Indians Health Stripes. Very active. His latest book is The Leaders We Need, second version, and he's published multiples of books and has been very active in government and corporate organizations. So I brought him in here today so that you could ask him questions about where we're heading today as a nation, as a world, and what type of leaders that we need. With that, Michael, and by the way, if you'd like to purchase the book, He brought some copies. I think it's $10, so if you'd like, or you can just ask him and he'll give it to you for free. But you have to, I don't know what you have to do. So obviously, if you ask a good question, we also have quite distinguished faculty members here. I don't know if you guys all know Dr. Collier, Dr. Gali, Dr. Shu, Dr. Goyal, our department chair, and if you ask a good question, all of them told me that they will waive your final exam for this semester. Congratulations, and Dr. Maccabee, please.
You have some water.
I have some water right in the cup, and I have
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry?
Everything's in the way. I'll stand here. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to discuss a few things. Number one, what is the kind of leadership we need? We obviously don't have it. Two, why do we follow leaders anyway? What makes us follow someone? Number three, how are our values, what we're looking for, changing? And how does that affect leadership? Four, I'll talk about the importance of personality intelligence. I've written about it in the book. The ability to really understand people. People you work with, understand what makes them want to follow, what makes them engage in the workplace. Why is it important? Next, how can we develop the kinds of leaders we need? What does that take? Let me ask you, how many of you think in the future you would want to be leaders in it, of any sort, organization and so on? Most. Which is good. I'll say something about this. We need leaders at all kinds of levels. It's not just at the top of things. Then finally, I just want to talk about how can we we're going to look for candidates for president, for other things in the next election. How do we select somebody who can really be a good leader? What do we need to look for? First of all, I want to start out with a question. What is a leader? What is a leader? You can find, I don't know, 150 definitions. You look it up. You have Warren Bennis, who is a distinguished leadership writers and researchers said a leader is someone with a vision who can realize it. Yeah, but that's true also of a gardener, isn't it? Carpenter. That doesn't really explain it. Bill Gates said a leader is someone who empowers. But did Stalin empower people? He disempowered people. A lot of leaders have made followers into robots who follow them. It's not a good definition. Napoleon said a leader deals in hope. Well, that's true to a degree, but it's also true of a bookie. So I think there's only one really good definition of a leader. A leader is someone who has followers. Now, that may seem simple. Think about it. If you have followers, you are a leader, right? If you have a high position and no one follows you, you're not a leader, are you? So the really interesting question is, why does someone follow a leader? Not only why, but how. You can follow in a way which is dictatorship that you have to follow, or you can want to follow. You want to collaborate. That's what we ideally want. Furthermore, leadership always depends on a context. Somebody can be a leader in one context and not in another. If you think about it, Winston Churchill, he was the indispensable leader of Britain in World War II, rejected by the British public both before and after the war. Before World War II, he wanted to rearm Britain. He was considered a warmonger by the Brits who wanted peace. After the war, he wanted to maintain the British Empire, and the British people wanted socialism. They didn't want an empire. So you can't look at qualities, can't look at personal qualities to define a leader. He had the same qualities, didn't he? Before and after. You have to look at the context. You can look at business, somebody like Jerry Yang, Yahoo, who created the company, but he was unable to run it. He had the ability of an entrepreneurial leader, but not of a leader of a large organization. So we could go on, but keep in mind, leadership is a relationship in a context. That is the best definition of leadership I can find. That makes sense to you? So we have to look at both leaders and followers. Now, why do we need leaders? Why do people follow a leader? If you go back to hunters and gatherers, like Native Americans or African tribes, way back at the beginning of human history, they would only have a leader for a particular project. Somebody could be a war leader, somebody could be a hunting leader, somebody could be a religious leader. But they would not let anyone stay as a leader. Anybody who tried to be a leader all the time was ostracized. And if you look even Native Americans like the Comanches, you can see they would have a leader for a war party, but that person was not a leader normally. If you look at peasant societies, I've studied peasant societies in Mexico and other parts of the world. They don't like leaders. They don't want anything to do with leaders. You know, we have your family, often a democratic town meeting. Why do they need leaders? The Mexicans hired Emiliano Zapata to be their leader during the revolution. But he was a kind of a cowboy. They brought him to be the leader for that purpose. So, as we become more complex, we have, and particularly when groups started to be larger, make war, sometimes the leaders they hired stayed and became the lords of the barons and forced others to serve them. If you look at the Bible, the Old Testament, the Jewish people didn't have a national leader, they had judges. But when they were frightened of the Philistines attacking them, they asked the judge Samuel, who was their judge, to give them a king. And Samuel said to them, "You're not going to like having a king. Going to make your sons into his soldiers. Going to make your daughters work for him in his kitchens and fields." He said, no, we want a king. So gave them Saul, and then they were very unhappy. They didn't like it, but it was too late. People sometimes get leaders they don't need. They also sometimes reject the leaders they do need. You go back to the Bible also. When Moses took the Jews out of Egypt, they said, why have you taken us here? Terrible. We were better off as slaves. At least we knew where the next meal was coming from. They're very unhappy. So Moses kept them for 40 years in the desert to go from Egypt to what is now Israel, Palestine. Doesn't take 40 years to walk. But he wanted to turn people with a slave mentality into free people. Took 2 generations in the desert to change their personality, change their social character. So why do we follow leaders? Well, there could be either rational reasons or irrational reasons. You can follow a leader because we see that leader is doing good things, and, share the leader's values. Or we can have what psychoanalysis calls transference. Project onto this person qualities, magical qualities, like children, treating the leader like a good parent. And you sometimes see that. People projecting. I think you could see it with Obama. They thought he was going to solve everything. Projecting onto it, magical qualities. You can see it sometimes disappear. I mean, people look to someone as a great helper. Can see right now in Germany, Angela Merkel was called Mutti, mother. She had huge majorities. Now everyone wants to get rid of her. Can change. Bill Clinton was somebody everyone admired. Now they don't even want to see him around because the whole values have changed. Climate has changed. The Me Too movement makes everyone now take seriously the way Clinton treated women. So we can see change. We can see sometimes people project. Sometimes they think somebody's a magic helper, and then suddenly they'll turn on them. You can see, I mean, for Trump's base, they think he's a wonderful magic helper. If he lost, you would see, suddenly everyone would see what a creepy character he is. Same people that he called names, lying cad, etc. Now they think he's wonderful. If he lost, you can bet they would no longer think he was so great. So we have to look at the fact that leadership is sometimes irrational. The psychoanalyst Erich Fromm studied the rise of Hitler in Germany, and he analyzed the fact that the German lower middle class, people who are small shopkeepers and business people, craftspeople, they had a certain kind of social character. They were very frugal, they had a very strong ethical system. They were very effective being saving their money, very patriotic. They worshiped the Kaiser. Suddenly World War I came, huge inflation, their money was worthless. all their attitudes and values no longer connected. They were angry, they were looking for who did this to us? Along comes Hitler and he says, the Jews did this, the bankers did this, the elite did this to you. I will make Germany great again. Sound familiar? And they followed him to their disaster. It can happen. You can think of what we're seeing today in this country is a big divide between the rural and the urban, small towns and the big cities, which you can see in many parts of the world, this kind of gap between the rural and urban values. But what we're seeing, we're in a period of historic change in work, in production, in technology. And the people in the urban areas are adapting, people like you, using information technology, working, understanding that you have to work collaboratively in teams, etc. People in many of these small towns and rural areas found that their work was disappearing. The factories are disappearing. The work they did, the small business people were being pushed out, first by Walmart, then by Amazon. No longer the attitudes and values they had, no longer connected. People were calling them names, deplorables, etc. They were angry, they were looking for somebody who would make them great again. It's understandable. If you're going to bring this country together, you have to think of everyone, not just one group or another group. To think of policies that are going to help everyone. So what we're seeing today, particularly in the more developed urban areas, we're seeing a huge shift in the social framework, in the context, in the family. When I grew up, I'm 85 years old now. When I grew up, 70% of the families in this country were led by a single male wage earner. Today, there are fewer families like that than there are families headed by a single woman. The median family has two wage earners. The experience of children growing up in these families is totally different. How many of you were born in a family where there was a single male wage earner? Very few. Very few. 20 years ago, a lot of hands had gone up, generation ago. But in these rural areas, a lot of them are still traditional families, traditional attitudes. Today, your children growing up, early on, they'll be in daycare centers. They have to learn social skills, have to learn to collaborate. When you come home from work, you're exhausted. Children, as one doctor at Harvard said, parents start treating their children like Prozac. I mean, they don't want any conflict. They're happy to see their kids. They feel guilty, and the kids know they're guilty. So they know how to manipulate their parents. They know how to get things from them. And they see their parents not so much as authorities, but as service providers who are going to make sure they get to play dates, get to little courses, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing the parents care about is that they do well in school. They let them get away with everything. I see that with my grandson. You look at his room and it's like an absolute hurricane went through it. So I said to him that he's 11 years old. So I said, "Oh, William, what a neat room. You've done really a wonderful job cleaning up this." He started to laugh. But he knew he doesn't have to do anything. Nobody's going to make him do anything. When I grew up, you had to make sure everything was in order, clean, so totally different. We're in a different world. So when children who see their parents as service providers get to work, how do they see their managers? What have you done for me lately? It's not an authority anymore. It's a service provider. Only 30% of employees at American companies are engaged at work, according to the Gallup surveys. And why? Mainly because they don't like their supervisors. Supervisors are not caring. They're not being good service providers. It's a different world. Different kind of leadership. So if you're going to really be a manager, a leader that engages people, that gets high productivity, you have to understand people. It's not being just a goody-goody. People are too soft, don't do very well. It's not just giving in to people. It's understanding them. Understanding what role they should be in. Recognizing their accomplishments. Showing interest. Being concerned about their future, their development. But this takes personality intelligence. And it's a matter not of just intellectuals, also a matter of the heart, head and the heart. You read a lot about emotional intelligence. But I prefer to think of a heart that listens. Comes from the Bible. King Solomon has a dream and where God asks him what he most wants, and he says a heart that listens. And that's the basis of his wisdom. But you find the same views in the Muslim tradition, in the Quran. Ibn Khaldun, 14th century Muslim thinker, said, we think with our hearts. The head is good for mathematics, logic, craft, but the head can never tell you what is true, what is good, what's beautiful. It's a matter of the head and the heart. And you have to develop your heart. It's not a soft heart. It's a strong heart. The word courage comes from cor, the Latin for heart. Strong heart. So it's a matter of both intellectual and emotional, head and heart, which we should be developing. But are we? Is that what we're doing in management courses? Sergey, is that what we're doing in management courses?
Absolutely.
I'd like to see one. The problem with just talking about emotional intelligence, you can have an ability to sense people's emotions. That doesn't mean you know how to do anything about it. You can understand people in order to exploit them. So it's not enough to understand people. What's important is that you also have a philosophy. everyone has a philosophy. You go back to one of the great essays. One of the great essays in American philosophy is William James's essay on pragmatism. Any of you read that? I really recommend it. James starts out saying we all have a philosophy. Many of us, it's not conscious. But everyone has a sense of purpose, values. Sometimes it's just getting ahead, doing well, pleasing people. But the people who are the great leaders have a very conscious humanistic philosophy. Abraham Lincoln's philosophy, where he talked about the man and the dollar, but the man comes before the dollar. Talked about the evils of slavery. Talked about how to make a society which was both prosperous and just. Why he not only fought against slaveholders, but he also created the land grant universities, supported the railroads. He had a sense of the future. One of the things in my new book here, The Leaders We Need, is talking about how to develop a philosophy, how to develop your understanding people. So what are the kinds, why do people become leaders? I mean, the best people become leaders for reasons like, to respond to injustice. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, great leaders who responded to injustice, and a philosophy based on justice. But not just that, bringing people together. It wasn't just to help their people, it was to integrate the people. Mandela refused to have any revenge on the whites in South Africa. He wanted to create a better culture, a better society. Martin Luther King talked about a country where people were judged on their character, not their race. And other people become leaders to help people. Mother Teresa. I've worked for over 50 years with homes for orphaned and abandoned children. Latin America, starting in Mexico. Started by an American priest, Father William Wasson in Mexico, and now in 9 countries. In Central America and the Caribbean, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Peru, Bolivia, Haiti, Dominican Republic. In Haiti, we have 2 hospitals, one for grown-ups, one for children. This all started. How did it start? Father Wasson he went to a seminary in California, but the bishop in his home refused to ordain him because he had been sickly. So he went to Mexico. He got a degree in adolescent psychology. He was teaching in Mexico City College. The bishop of Cuernavaca in Mexico ordained him, gave him a little parish in the marketplace. One day the poor box was robbed. He went and he found out it was robbed by a little boy. So he went to the prison. He said, "Warden, I don't want to press charges. You can let him go." And the warden said, "But Father, he's a street kid. He's an orphan. He'll be back here." So Father Wilson said, "Well, I'll take him." 2 days later, the warden came, 10 little boys. "Father, you want little boys? Here they are." Now, over half a century later, 20,000 children in these homes. And some of them are running the different homes. The executive director was an orphan. The name of the organization is Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, our little brothers and sisters. The executive director was a pequeño. 5 of the leaders of the homes were brought up in the homes. Now, I've been working with them for over 50 years. I'm their official leadership consultant. And I work with the executive director over FaceTime every other week, coaching. I work also we have volunteers from the United States, Europe, Latin America, and some of them have stayed and become leaders because they wanted to help people. So Father Wasson developed a philosophy, a leadership philosophy, which has been crucial. He went around and studied orphanages. Boys Town was the most famous. They had all kinds of schools and took care of the boys. But when they were 18, they had to leave. Father Wasson said, I don't want to throw anyone out. I don't want to create a bureaucracy. I want a family. I want my children to think of themselves as brothers and sisters. Nobody has to leave. So now he created a philosophy. The philosophy had a purpose. To develop, not just to save lives, to develop children who would become caring and productive, who would be people who would help others, who would be successful in their own societies. To do that meant they would be educated as far as they could go. We have children who have become lawyers, doctors, but also electricians and carpenters and dressmakers and agronomists, you name it. However, when they finish secondary school, they have to do a year of service for others. So he said the first thing is security. But you have to balance that by work. Everybody has to do some work. So they don't feel they're just being given something. Even little kids, they're sweeping them. Third, sharing. When he would give his sermons, he would say Christianity is really about caring and sharing with others. I want my children to visit hospitals, prisons. I want them to be focused on helping others. Fourth, responsibility and co-responsibility. I don't want people following rules. I want them doing what's right. You know, and some people ask that, what does that mean, responsibility? Well, I'll give you an example. I worked with a group of adolescent young men in a village in Mexico. And we were working with the American Friends Service Committee. They were given animals, they were raising chickens, selling eggs, so on. But they were very passive and obedient. They would follow orders. They were brought up to take authority, be passive. They did things out of fear. And I kept talking about being responsible. They didn't understand the word. Finally, one day, one of the boys said to me, "Now I know what you mean." I said, what? He was living just with his mother, and they had a cow, and he had to feed the cow every day. He said, you know, I always feed the cow because I've been afraid my mother would beat me. I didn't feed the cow. But today, I looked in the cow's eyes. I saw the cow was alive. I knew I'd always feed the cow. That's responsibility. The ability to respond humanly with the heart. It was like a transformation. And that's one of the parts of the philosophy. And he also talked about love as agape. You know, we in English have one word for love. In ancient Greek, there are 4 different words. There is eros, that's romantic love. Storge, family love. Philos, brotherly love. And agape. And agape is the kind of love, in the Bible it says God's love is described as agape. It's the kind of love of understanding another person and really wanting the best in their development. A type of love that's very active. Understanding, head and heart. That's a philosophy. But I could go, I mean, I interviewed Bill Hewitt, one of the founders of Hewlett-Packard, HP. Way back when he was in the 1970s. I said to him, what's the purpose of HP? He said, the purpose of HP is to make tools that help technical people do their job better. He didn't say it was to make money, or to make tools that help people, technical people do their job better. I said, how do you do that? So we have certain values, certain principles. One is excellence. And that means if our engineers need to learn the newest techniques, we'll pay for them to go back to Stanford Engineering School, take courses. Second, cooperation. We go to the customer, we find out what they want, come back to Palo Alto, we have teams, the developer, the manufacturer, the marketer, working together. Third, loyalty. We don't lay anyone off. We have a downturn in business, everyone takes one day off a week, 20% cut in salary, starting with me. Fourth, innovation. We want entrepreneurs, new ideas. I said, but Bill, if you have entrepreneurs, aren't they going to leave, start their own companies? He said, of course. But because we treated them so well, they'll be our customers and they'll be our suppliers. And that was the beginning of Silicon Valley. Apple came out of that. Others came out of HP. Philosophy. Importance of a philosophy. So, I mean, ask yourself, what's your philosophy? What's your purpose? You're going to be a leader. What's the purpose? Is it the purpose like Martin Luther King to fight injustice? Is it a purpose like Mother Teresa to help people? Is it a purpose like Steve Jobs to make some great, insanely great products? I mean, what is it? If you're going to do anything real in this world as a leader, you have to have a purpose that inspires others, that brings others with you, that connects. Otherwise, you're just a dictator. See, how are we on time? Well, I'm going to begin to close up. Let me say, first of all, we need leaders on at least 4 different levels. We need leaders globally, because otherwise we're not going to deal with global problems like climate, weapons of mass destruction, trade. That's on a global level. We need leaders on the national level, deal with health, education, national defense. These are all national. We need leaders on local levels, schools, hospitals, organizations. So these are different, but in none of these cases is it one leader. We need somebody who's working with a team of leaders. They have to have different qualities also. What I found in the most advanced companies, you need strategic leaders, you need operational leaders who make the visions happen, and then you need networking leaders who bring people together across disciplines. And they have different personalities, they have different qualities. So it's not one kind of leadership, it's not one kind of quality. But I think today, what we most need are leaders with a humanistic philosophy. What does that mean? To me, it means every person has a potential to develop their productive selves to pursue happiness. But this depends not only on their own efforts, but support by society. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, our success should be measured not in the wealthy getting richer, but those who have nothing being taken care of and helped to pursue happiness, pursue their happiness. So if you're looking for the kind of leader we want as president, the future, look for three things, or maybe four. Number one, do they have the right policies? Are they really in touch with what's going on in the world? Changes. Are they responding to the needs taking place with changes in technology, work, families, role of women, these things? Are they in touch? Do they have a humanistic philosophy? Something, a vision like Lincoln or Roosevelt had. Really improve this culture, to raise the level of this culture, to bring people together. Third, can they communicate? Because it's no use. You can have all the best policies if you can't communicate. You can't engage people. It's useless. Useless. You can be an advisor. You're not going to be a leader. But finally, what I think we often leave out, the best leaders have a sense of humor. The sense of humor is the emotional equivalent sense of reality. You know, when anybody criticizes Trump, he immediately fights back. He has no sense of humor. If you look at our best leaders, look at Lincoln, look at FDR, Ronald Reagan. They all had a sense of humor there when they were attacked. I had an experience with Reagan. I was teaching at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And one of my students was a leader of the radical group, very radical and so on. And the Reagan came with the regents of the education, California education, to the campus. And he was out there at a break, and my student ran up to him, said, Governor Reagan, I want you to meet my professor, Professor Maccabee. So he took me over there. So then he said, Governor Reagan, I heard you said you've seen one tree, you've seen them all. So Reagan smiled and said, beautiful campus you have here. Then he turned to me and said, he's the governor of the whole state of California. Reagan smiled and said, at least you learned a little civics. But that's the kind of, can you imagine Trump? He would have, how he would have reacted to a student like that? He might even have beat him up. So let me end on that. We're looking for the right policies, the right philosophy, the ability to communicate, and a sense, at least, not only intellectual, but also emotional, which can be seen in seeing the world emotionally, intellectually as it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you ask questions, guys, ask loudly and briefly.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Maccoby. Sorry. Yeah. My name is Christopher Iwerebo. I'm a senior accounting major here in UD's College. You did mention.
You got to speak very loud because I don't.
Yeah. Okay. You did mention some reasons why people follow leaders. You talked about the context, and then you talked about relationship. Now with the just concluded election, we're wondering what kind of analyzing and looking at it, what it means for America future. Now for us, if we find ourselves as leaders in one context, probably we have been successful, and then the situation changes, we see ourselves in a different position as leaders. What would be your advice for us to be successful in the new position?
No, could you tell me
what advice would you give to the students to be successful? In brief, right?
Yeah, be successful in one position in this position.
What should they
You
do?
know, as I've said, leadership is a relationship in a context. So I can't give you advice unless I know the context. I can't give you advice unless I know your philosophy. What's your purpose? Who are you? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? When I coach, say I coach the executive director of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, he comes in and says, I've been thinking about this and that. What do you think? So I say, why? Why are you going to do that? What do you think is going to result? Helping people become better leaders isn't telling them. It's helping them to clarify. It's helping them to decide. Helping them to reason, not to tell.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Derek.
Hi, my name is Derek, and I wanted to know what do you think are some flaws that are associated with being a good leader?
Flaws of leadership.
What are the flaws of leadership?
What are the flaws?
Yes.
Well, the flaws are obvious. People get too big for their britches. Get puffed up. Stop listening. I had the experience, I was coaching CEO of a big hospital system. And he had a vision of changing everything. So we were sitting with all the vice presidents and chairs of at the hospital. And they were trying to tell him that what he was saying would have problems. And he wasn't listening. So I turned to him finally. I said, you're not listening to them. He said to me, I didn't get here by listening to other people. That was true. But he also got fired. So sometimes certain qualities may help become a leader, but those same qualities are destructive. Because a person is so sure of themselves, they won't listen. Do you have a question?
My question is, what's the best way for follower to deal with leaders like Donald Trump? What's the best way or your suggestion for follower working with some leader like Donald Trump in an organization?
What's the best way to work with Donald Trump? What's the best way to work with Donald Trump?
What's the best way to work with him?
Yeah.
The only way to work with Donald Trump is to flatter him. Because Donald Trump his purpose has one purpose, and that's to be a winner, to be admired. That's all he cares about. So, I mean, he has no convictions whatsoever. He was a liberal years ago. Now he's a big conservative. Why? Because those are the people who tell him how great he is. Those are his constituency.
Okay.
Now that's one question. Go ahead.
What does leadership look like in the future with artificial intelligence? What would you think about that?
What does leadership look like in the future?
Yes, for artificial intelligence.
Well, that depends on us. Are we going to maintain a democratic society? Could easily slip into authoritarianism. It's happened throughout history. Populist leaders like Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Hitler, they were all democratically chosen, all of them. And then they became the dictators. So it's really up to, do we have enough will to maintain a democracy, to make sure our leaders are not dictators, but listen to the will of the people, keep the law. I mean, this depends. History is not so great on all this. People who founded this country, particularly James Madison. If you look at the Federalist Papers that were written before the Constitution, he studied all these historical democracies. He said the greatest danger to this republic is democracy, because people can become enamored of some dictator. And that's why they brought in the Constitution the legislative, the judicial, the balance of power created. You never see the word democracy in the Constitution. It's not in there. Because, as they pointed out, we're a republic, not a democracy. So we had these checks and balances. So part of our government is appointed. In the beginning, even the senators were not voted in by all the citizens, but only by the legislators. So keep in mind, I mean, the people founded this, the architects of this country, were very aware of the dangers of democracy. Yeah.
So my question is, based off your experience with other countries, how does leadership differ in other countries from the leaderships here in America?
How does it differ?
Yes.
Well, I'll give you an example. I worked with a company, global company, and I interviewed people in Asia, Europe, so on. If you go to Taiwan, they never had the Cultural Revolution. So they still had a lot of the traditional Chinese Confucian values. So people in the organization wanted the leader to be like a good parent, good father. They were very loyal. The leader was a teacher, this loyal relation. In Beijing, which had a cultural revolution, got rid of Confucian thinking. When I asked them, what's a good leader? A good leader is like a basketball coach. He knows where to put people in the right positions. He knows the strategy. He can change the strategy if he sees it's not working. Chinese, totally different. In Sweden, they believe everything should be consensus, everyone should agree. But they don't like conflict. In Germany, they like conflict, but it has to be based on facts. And then when the leader says, this is it, everyone marches. Sweden, after everyone agrees, sometimes they go away and they just do their own thing. So every country, there are differences. You have to talk to people, you have to ask people. I always say to them, what's your idea of a good leader and what's your idea of a good parent? And they're very related.
Okay, maybe. How many times did you change career path, and how did you overcome public speaking anxiety?
That was
Well, actually, Dr. Maccabee is right now writing about his autobiography. He has not changed his career path. And I don't think he has.
What advice do you have
What?
for someone
What was
that
it?
changes career path?
Oh, if you're changing career path, what advice could you give
What's the,
for career path, for changing careers? Any advice? I don't know.
well, I mean, again, I don't believe in giving generalized advice. You know, if you want to change careers, I would want to know why, what kind of career you'd want, how you would, why you would think to be successful. I mean, all of these things demand knowing the person, knowing the context. You can't make all these generalizations, like one kind of leader, are completely misleading. There's so many courses that teach you to be a leader, which are really useless, sometimes really negative.
Can you answer the question?
Yeah.
And Pop,
I won't be able to hear you.
Throughout your time in Central and South America, what was the greatest complication you had with getting the children to, I guess, trust you or buy into what you were trying to teach them?
What was the greatest what?
What was the complication that, what complications did you have that came up with trying to get the kids to listen to you or buy into what you were teaching them?
okay. Difficulties, I'll paraphrase if I understand that. Difficulties in creating those shelters for children. Difficulties that you experienced.
The difficulties I've experienced.
Correct? Or the difficulties?
What difficulties did he have trying to get the kids to, you know, buy into his message?
Okay, the difficulties that, like the difficulties of the way that the kids could buy into that message. The orphans that the father, the orphans that you've been helping in South America.
Yeah.
So what difficulties did they have, like following, and how did the father help them?
Well, what I found in the homes is the kids would come often very depressed. They had seen violence, had seen their parents murdered. They were depressed. Took 2 years before they had hope. But the important thing was that the other kids helped them. And the other kids would say to them, you know, they'd say the worst thing is if you make yourself a victim. The worst thing is if you say, pobre de mí, pobre de mí. That completely paralyzes you. Now, it's very interesting. Because of UNICEF, there's been globally a policy to get rid of orphanages. Get rid of all orphanages, because they found the ones in Eastern Europe and Romania and so on, really very bad, very oppressive to the kids and so on. So we were faced with this idea, let's get rid of all our homes. But instead of doing that, we work with the governments. And now they wanted the children in foster homes. So we're working with the foster homes. We're helping them develop a philosophy in every home. Children are coming to our schools. They may come for the week and go back to the home. The Honduras government has now hired us to evaluate foster homes throughout the country. So we've transformed ourselves from an orphanage to what I call it, una familia de familias, family of families. Okay, I'll end there.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.